It's a great pleasure to welcome Nick Mason to noise11.com, and we are going to see you finally in Australia after nearly 30 years. I'm very, very excited about that.
Well, we're excited to be coming. I mean, as you say, it's been a long time. I've been back to Australia in between, but not playing.
Oh, a couple of little sneaky holidays down here, huh?
I'm afraid so, yes.
Oh, where'd you visit?
Primarily Sydney. I've got friends there. There's a comedian called Kathy Lett. Have you ever come across Kathy?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, she's a very old friend of ours, and so we hung out with her for a while. And of course, saddest of all, my other great Australian friend was Barry Humphries.
Yeah, what a sad loss to the world that was.
Very sad, yeah.
We have a Dame Edna Lane in Melbourne, so
Oh, really?
When you're in Melbourne, right in the city, you might want to go and visit Dame Edna Lane.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that would be good. What I love about this show is that over the years with Pink Floyd, it's been very rare that the band has gone back prior to Dark Side of the Moon. I think when David did his last round of tours, there might have been one of these days it was in there. Roger rarely went back before Dark Side of the Moon. You're really filling in a piece of history with a Saucerful of Secrets, aren't you?
Yes, I think we are. In fact, I sort of hope we are, because the one thing that you can guarantee is that you're never more than 5 meters away from someone playing Comfortably Numb. And to some extent, what's important about the earlier work is that it sort of shows where we sort of came from and then went to. And I have to say, it's inevitable that the early work is then overtaken by the more by the Dark Side and the Wall and so on. An audience particularly will often come for those particular songs from that era. But what's quite nice about this is the rediscovery of it, I suppose.
And I guess you're getting the chance to, do some songs that have been rarely performed. Some, I'm guessing, have never been performed by Pink Floyd.
Yeah. Now, we like to think that there are some songs that really, if they were performed over 50 years ago. And they're fun to play. I mean, that's the sort of interesting thing about the early work. It's not quite so critical to play it exactly as it was played on the record, and it's more in the spirit of. That's fun for us, I suppose, is what I'd say.
The Beatles stopped performing at around the same time Pink Floyd started, and they stopped performing because they couldn't perform the intricate works live. Sgt. Pepper and the White Album or whatever. How difficult was you to be performing some of these recorded works back in those days?
Well, of course, rather weirdly, we never had 10,000 screaming fans, which I think was the biggest problem the Beatles faced. No, but that sort of interchange is quite interesting, because we were recording Piper, which was our first album, at the time that the Beatles were recording Sgt. Pepper. And we were both in Abbey Road at the same time. We were in Studio 3, they were in 2. And actually, what it did was enormously useful to us, because, yes, they did stop performing live, but they really began to stretch their legs in terms of utilizing studio time. And because they were allowed to then use lots of studio time, the record companies thought, this is the new thing. So they gave us the ability to also start using studio time.
One of the songs that I have seen that you have been doing, Childhood's End, and I think that's one of the ones that I can't see any record of it ever being performed back in the day. That's an interesting song, isn't it? Because you've got a drum piece on that song that is basically replicated in time on the next album, on Dark Side of the Moon. Was that deliberate?
No, I'd never really thought about that. Oh, God, I've been stealing my own work. No, I hadn't really thought about that, but yes, there are elements. But I mean, I think again that's one of the interesting things about the early work, that you quite often see a pointer as to where we might go next.
Yeah, there are a couple of tracks on here that did survive the post Dark Side of the Moon and have been performed regularly. Tracks like One of These Days, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, Echoes, Astronomy Domini. I think they became staples of the Pink Floyd set for the years to come, didn't they?
Well, some of them did, and at different times. I mean, Roger certainly played Set the Controls, but I don't think I ever played Set the Controls just with David after Roger had gone. So for me, that's one of the songs I particularly like playing anyway. It's a lovely sort of piece for a drum, for the drum part, just because it's using mallets, which is a slightly different thing to endlessly hitting everything as hard as you possibly can.
Do you go out of your way to keep the songs, I guess, as similar to what they were on the record back in the day?
I think it's a good question because it's variable. We certainly try and keep more or less the structure, apart from Atom Heart Mother, where basically we actually take some sections and play the sections rather than trying to produce the whole piece in its entity. As I say, I'm not anxious to keep it exactly as it was. I think what I like is to make sure that we play it in the spirit of, because at the time when we were playing with Syd, there was a lot of improvising that went on. And I think if we can occasionally sort of fall back to that point, it sort of gives an indication of, as I say, what we were doing in 1967, 68.
Syd Barrett, as you mentioned there, was very much part of that first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and a little bit of Saucerful of Secrets. Tell me about his creativity. What do you remember about him as a songwriter and a songwriting genius?
Well, I think, one of the tragedies of Syd is that he was, when I first met him, he was enormously personable and cheerful and a really great writer. I mean, the Piper album is full of really interesting and really different songs. They're not all in one genre, really. And I think he, if he hadn't sort of had the breakdown, I think he could have gone on to be a fantastic songwriter and written all sorts of things.
Was it a comfortable transition from Syd to David?
Well, I wouldn't quite say that. It was, looking back, what's so surprising is that we thought we could carry on without Syd. But by then, Syd had become so disjointed that it just wasn't a pleasure to be in a band and playing music anymore. And so that the moment when David came in and Syd went out, there was an enormous sense of relief, even though we'd lost our main songwriter and our frontman.
Was he aware that he was transitioning out of the band?
Oh yes, yeah, and he'd become more and more erratic, and we actually had a sort of meeting because we thought maybe we could take a leaf out of the Beach Boys book, and that Syd would stay and write and wouldn't be coming on the road with us. But I think both management and Syd at the time thought that wouldn't work, and I don't think it would have worked, I have to say.
He did go on to create two brilliant solo albums, with Madcap and Barrett. Both Roger and David contributed to both of those. Were you invited to be part of that recording session? No, I wasn't, because I basically Syd didn't need that. I mean, in fact, the end of the day, I think Rick did also put some music into it, but I just think at that point, I
I don't think I was that keen to get involved in it anyway.
And he did come back once, didn't he, when you were recording the Wish You Were Here album? He turned up at the studio.
Yes, that was very odd. I say it was very odd because everyone has a slightly different take on when he came or how long he was there. And it looks as though he actually came on 2 days, but came one day and then again on the next. But it was, I only say that because I've seen photographs of him and he's wearing different clothes. So it must be that he came the second day, but I don't have any memory of that at all. My memory actually of that was this very odd thing of I'd been recording something in the studio and I came into the control room and there was this large bald guy. And I think David said, don't you know who that is? And I said, no, I just didn't recognize him.
Wow. Was that the last time you ever saw him?
Yeah, absolutely. That was, what, 75?
Mm. You're quite the car freak we know about. Have you ever driven an Australian car, Nick Mason?
Yes, I'm afraid I have. I did a race in Bahrain as a support race for the Grand Prix in a Holden. And I've no wish to offend my Australian audience, but it's not my favourite car.
No, I would imagine your favourite car would have a long list before we even get to Holden. Do you have a favourite car?
It's a bit like asking about my favourite children. I don't want to offend them.
Come on, offend the kids. Who's the favourite child?
Oh, all right. It's a Ferrari. It's a Ferrari 250 GTO, 1962, finished third at Le Mans, and was then driven back to the factory.
Wow. And this is quite the collector's item. I have heard about this car. You picked it up for quite a steal back in the
Well,
day.
no, at the time it was a record price. It was sort of 35,000 £35,000. And everyone thought I was mad, but now they're beginning to think maybe I wasn't.
No, I think if people want to Google, they might find out that appreciated quite nicely. Yes, you did very well. Do you still race?
Well, I'm sort of announced. I sort of said I think I'm stopping now. I mean, I'm nearly 80, and elderly rock drummers rushing around race circuits. It's probably better now to let the kids loose in the car. I've got some enthusiastic children who I think do a better job than me these days.
As long as it goes to the favourite child, though.
Well, quite.
You've got the band coming.
Anyway, that's enough life coaching.
Yes, thank you. The band that you put together for A Saucerful of Secrets is incredible in itself. Gary Kemp from Spandau Ballet. We had Gary down in Australia. Well, it must have been just before he joined you, because he was down here toured, and then he went home, and suddenly he was nabbed by the Nick Mason band. That was an interesting choice. Were there many people that were on the short list to do that job for you?
No, I think I like this idea that I somehow put the band together. I did nothing of the sort. This band formed itself around me. Wow. I mean, it was very old school in that respect. It was sort of the people who were nearest and keenest. We didn't have any auditions. It was sort of who knows who would really like to do it. And Gary, I sort of not expected him to, but he was enormously enthusiastic, and I think sort of helped really glue the thing together very quickly. We'd never, some of the Dom, I'd never played with Dom or with Lee before, and we just took 2 days in a rehearsal studio to see if we thought it would work. And by the end of day one, we went, yeah, this is great.
And Guy Pratt, well, he must be almost part of your family.
Well, absolutely. He's my favourite child. Oh, no,
no, that's who's getting the Ferrari. But Guy is actual family of Floyd, isn't he, with Rick Wright?
Yeah, that's a sort of strong connection. But in fact, Yeah, you could argue that Guy's been in Pink Floyd longer than Roger was. No.
Yeah, and I was always a big fan of Randall and Hopkirk deceased.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'll tell Guy that.
Yeah. I pop on YouTube from time to time and find the old episodes. They're all up there.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to the shows, and you've added extra shows for Sydney and Melbourne, which is great news.
Yes, no, do it. Well, as I say, we're really looking forward to coming over. It's been a long time, and I think I think Australia had a particularly tough time with COVID and a whole load of natural disasters as well. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, really looking forward to these shows and hearing these songs that, I know I've never heard. Except for a few when Roger's been to town, but lots of things that I will be hearing live for the very first time, all from the Discovery box, all up there. So,
oh yeah, terrific.
We've got plenty to research before you get down here. Mason, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you at noise11.com, and
well, for me too. Thank you.
See you in Australia.
Yeah.